In this video, I'm going to show you how to handle handheld HDR in two different ways. The first way is just blending two images together in Photoshop, and the other is actually using the HDR Pro processing engine to get the best possible exposure.
And then I'm going to show you a few different ways to color tone your image to make it look just the way you want.
So what's the question? Are you ready? It's Photoshop time, and you know the drill. Smack it, whack it, and crack-a-lack.
Yes! That's awesome! What?
Okay, so I have my images, and you see there's roughly a 3-stop span looking over here at the metadata from the bright sunlit areas to the shaded areas of the building. I'm going to take the two extremes of this exposure variance, select them by holding the Command or Control key, go up to Tools, Photoshop, load files into Photoshop layers. And now we can see, once it loads them automatically in the layers for me, and I toggle the eyeball on and off, do you see how, I'm hand holding this. It would have been better if I had a tripod with me, but I didn't. You can see I'm close, but I'm not close enough, right? So watch this. If you Command click and select both of those layers so they're both actively chosen, then go over to Edit and Auto Align Layers. Photoshop will figure it out. I like to choose Auto. That handles 99% of my problems. I have no vignette or geometric distortion because I'm standing in the same place and I'm using the same lens. I just didn't quite match it back up as I was changing exposure from taking it away from my eye. I'll click OK, and it's already done. All right, Command or Control minus to shrink it out. Take a look at this. I'm toggling off. Do you see how it's perfectly aligned the images now? And you can see it's basically like taking two photographs and putting them on a light table. It had to overlap them and twist them and do what it did. So now I just need to know where the edges are for the base image. I'm going to come over to my rulers. If you don't have your rulers open, just come over to View and put a check mark beside rulers or hit Command or Control R. Then you can, with the Move tool, you can click and drag a guide out of the rulers. So I know where the left side ends, and I'm clicking and dragging a guide from the top ruler. I know where the bottom ends. So when I turn this top image on, I see where I'm going to need to crop to. I'm going to hit C for the crop tool, which again is found right over here in the toolbar. And then I'm going to pull in the corners to match the guides for the left and right. I can visually see where the image doesn't line up on the right side, and the bottom and the top, pull that down a touch. Click Enter. And I've cropped it. I had delete crop pixels chosen because I know I'm not going to go back and use those ever. Command or Control 0 to fit in screen. Now toggle my eyeballs on and off. They still perfectly align. They're also both still selected. Now watch this. Before I get crazy with the quick selection tool and the color range selection for the sky, before I go too intense, remember Photoshop will do the bulk of this work for you. So let's let it. Go back to Edit, and right under Auto Align Layers is this magical function called Auto Blend Layers. Choose Stack Images, Seamless Tones and Colors, Content Aware, Fill, Transparent Areas. Don't really even need it to look at that because there are no transparent areas. I'm going to click OK.
6.5 hours later.
Bam. If that's not some magic, I don't know what is.
Nice.
So what I'm going to do is hit Command Option Shift letter E, merging all of those adjustments to its own layer. And now let's just continue moving forward. What would you do? I'd like to brighten up the shadows here because they still need to be a bit brighter. Well, let's just go on over to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, because I know it has this great shadow slider there that'll help me brighten up the shadows. There you go. It helped me brighten up the shadows. That's 100%, so that's looking a little crazy. Now notice with this particular technique, I'm getting some exaggerated color effects. Notice how it's really picking up the blue in the sky. Remember, in any shadow area, chances are it's being lit by the big reflected blue umbrella of the sky, since sunlight's not directly hitting it. And that particular technique has exaggerated that problem or effect. Now maybe this won't matter if this is going to be a black and white conversion. So I'll go to the very top and click black and white. Okay, it doesn't matter as much now that it's a black and white conversion. Maybe I still want to brighten this area of the shadow part of the building. Third tool down, the adjustment brush, and just click brighten those shadows at 100% so I can see what I'm doing, and just paint over what you wanted a little brighter, maybe a little touch here. I like that. And then I'm gonna click add new adjustment brush because I think this is too bright. So I'm gonna pull the exposure down, paint this down just a little bit. Dehaze is a good one to help pull that down. I'm on left bracket key to make this smaller. See, there's no rich blacks back here where there should be. That's too much. I think I'm gonna need a new brush for this particular one. Pull in the blacks and pull the blacks right back in here. Now if you go too far, like here, just grab the eraser tool and erase where you went too far. Tap the brush tool as long as that red pen is active. See the other pins that are now white? And if you hover over the pins, it shows you what you painted. I feel like this is in the same thing. This area should be darker. And then before you start making all these localized corrections like I'm doing currently, some of this can probably be fixed. Like we know that's a shadow. Some of this can probably be fixed just with a global edit, right? Instead of repainting all the individual shadows. So click on this edit tab. Go back to the basics, pull in the blacks overall, and pull up the clarity and the texture. That's going to really, I like the direction that's going. If I want to make this sky darker, toggle open the black and white mixer. We know it was a blue sky, so essentially we want to make the blues dark. So pull them down. Now notice what's happening. Even with our adjustments, we're now getting posterization back in here. So that's not going to work in combination with the other adjustments we've already made to this image. I'm gonna click OK and go back to Photoshop. So that's option 1 to get you where you want to go fairly quickly if you're ever in that handheld kind of situation. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna X out of that, not save, go back to bridge. I'm gonna select them all. And again, these aren't in perfect alignment because I wasn't on a tripod, but watch how good Photoshop does. I'm gonna go to Tools, Photoshop, and then merge to HDR Pro. That's going to take the bit depth from all of them. It's going to auto align them by twisting them as it needs. And it's going to create a final merged 32-bit document that has all the tonal information so that when we make those powerful adjustments, like making that blue sky rich and dark, the way Ansel Adams' skies were rich and dark, it's not going to posterize. Typically anything 16 bits and over is going to keep your blue skies from posterizing. So this is the Merge to HDR Pro dialog box. I don't need to remove ghosts because I don't have the wind blowing tree limbs or grass. There's no people moving or cars. I want to use all the sliders I'm used to, which is in Adobe Camera Raw. So by default, it's auto-checked. Open this image in Adobe Camera Raw as a 32-bit file for slider-driven tone mapping. That's exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to click Tone and ACR. So it creates an HDR 32-bit file in Photoshop, and then it pops me over to the Adobe Camera Raw dialog box.
6.5 hours later.
So now I have all the editing control, and you're looking at it, it's like, well, that still doesn't look that great, but all the information's there. So I'll slide up to the top here and just pull the shadow slider all the way over. It's going to nicely brighten up this area. And if let's start off with the black and white conversion by clicking this black and white button. Remember that technique we did earlier where we tried to make the blue sky darker? Now watch what happens when we go to the black and white mixer and do the exact same thing. See, there's zero posterization in the background, and it gives more drama to the overall image. But I still want to make this brighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the adjustment brush, third tool down, select it, and I'm going to pull up the exposure and the shadows. I'll come back and adjust these as needed. Right bracket key to make my brush bigger, or left bracket key to make your brush smaller, depending on what you're doing. And whatever you touch with the crosshairs in the center is what's going to be affected. So I like the direction of that. I think I'd even want to enhance the clarity, the texture, and if I pull up the dehaze, that'll make the blacks just a little richer, giving me an enhanced contrast control without even using the contrast slider. And I can still brighten it up just a touch. To taste. This is in black and white. So I like the direction of this. I think I'd probably like to make this a little darker. So I click Add New Adjustment Brush. All my settings are wrong because they're stuck to the last thing I did. So hit Command Option R. That resets all your sliders. So now I can just say I need to underexpose this little area just a touch. Now I typically make my adjustments a little heavy at the first part so I can see them, and then I can quickly adjust them as needed to get the look that I'm looking for. I think somewhere in there is good. Now looking at it overall, the image, I feel like this area right here is muddy. So I'd click a new adjustment brush. Command or Control R to reset everything. I feel like it needs to be brighter. I feel like it needs to have a lot more contrast, which clarity and dehaze will help me get some of that additional contrast in a more sophisticated way. Do you see how I'm brightening up the brights and darkening the darks? Put it right here as well. Maybe this one needs a little bit, maybe right here. Quite honestly, I'd try to see if I can make that sky even darker, just to see if it's possible. So I'll click Add New Adjustment Brush, Command or Control R to reset everything. Maybe blacker blacks, pull down my shadows, pull down my exposure, big key. And again, only what I'm touching with the crosshair is going to be affected. See how it's not making the building black because that crosshair is not touching the building? This is clearly too powerful of an adjustment, but that's okay because I can drag the slider to taste. And again, it only applies to where that crosshair is touching. So now I have that Ansel Adams looking sky, which I quite honestly really enjoy. Now, at this point, is this background becoming distracting? Do I need to make that perfectly black also? It's totally your call. I wanted you to see with the 32-bit file how you can really push it really far and it still look really good. Now let's come all the way back. I'm at the basic edit panel again, and I want to make some global adjustments and jump up my clarity. My dehaze is a little too much. Bring up the texture, make sure the highlights aren't blown out, but maybe bring up the exposure overall. That's too much. Click OK. Remember that 32-bit HDR files do take a long time to process, so just be prepared for that. So once I'm back in Photoshop, it's now compressed and saved back to a 16-bit file. You can see that by going up to mode. See, 16-bit is chosen. I'm going to go ahead and push that back to 8-bit so I have full access to everything in Photoshop. And now maybe I would just do some custom tweaking. Dodge the midtones. I'm at 20%, so it's a very subtle adjustment. I can hit 4 for 40% up in the opacity. And remember all your other toning abilities, right? We can come and colorize this. Drag it to that warm sepia look, which is always nice. Or we can come add a color lookup table. Toggle this open. Maybe go down to crisp warm and drag the opacity down. Something like that, which is also really nice. We can click on that photo filter, drag up the density of it, click on the color. Maybe we want it to be more of a cyanotype look-alike, something like that, which is also really nice. I just want you to see that you have total control over the way your image looks in local and global subject contrast, color, tone, and mood. I can't wait to see what you make.
Yes!
Hey, what are you still doing here? It's over.
Actually, all kidding aside, I hope this video helped, and if it did, consider subscribing. I like subscribers.
That's awesome! What? You just took one in the jugular, man! Whoa! Yes! Oh my god, I did! This is
Hey, you stayed to the end. You know what that means? You're awesome. I'm talking about you. Now get out of here.